Hi, everybody. My name is Hayley Milliman, and I am the head of education here at Prowritingaid. I am so excited to be here today talking to you about how you can edit your crime manuscript using Prowritingaid. As I just mentioned, I am the head of education at Prowritingaid, which basically means I get to nerd out about writing and editing all day. It means that I work primarily on our content, so on events like this, planning events like Crime Writers Week and Fantasy Writers Week, as well as leading workshops both in Prowritingaid University and then elsewhere around the internet. And then I also have a hand in a lot of the content that you see on the website, including our blog articles, our in-tool explanations, which I'll get to later in this presentation, and more. So during this session, we are going to first focus on the key copy edits that crime writers need to make in order for readers to enjoy their work. And then we're also going to talk about how Prowritingaid, the software specifically, can help you make those edits more easily. So let's go ahead and dive in. So the two main goals of a crime writer are, first, to make your writing more clear, and second, to make your writing more engaging. So I know that sometimes comes as a surprise to a lot of us as writers, because we spend so much time worrying about our characters. When we're writing crime, we spend so much time worrying about, leaving clues throughout our story, putting together a compelling mystery, crafting an antagonist who will keep our readers reading, right? We spend so much time thinking about plot, characterization, story structure, all of that type of thing. Those are so important. But if our writing is not clear or engaging, then we can have the best idea in the entire world and it's not going to matter, right? If our copy, if our actual words and how our sentences are strung together are not clear, then again, we can have the most compelling protagonist in the world. We can have the coolest plot ever, the coolest, most unique plot ever, but it won't matter. Readers will not engage with your writing if it's not clear and effective, right? So we need to make sure that our writing, the mechanics of how we put together our sentences, the words we choose, are doing our ideas justice. And that's really where Prowritingaid comes in. So let's talk about that first goal. Our first goal is to make our writing more clear so that your readers understand what's happening. When you're setting up your stories, you need to make sure that your readers can understand who your story is about, what the people in your story are doing, and really engage with your plot. Again, if you're hiding the who, the what, the when, and the how behind complicated sentence structures or word choices that don't really make sense for your audience, then your reader's just not going to engage with your work. So again, you can have the greatest idea in the world, but if you have not set up your sentences in an effective and engaging way, or if you have not chosen effective words, or if you've chosen words that are too effective, too difficult for your readers to understand, then they're not going to engage with those ideas. So there are three ways that I think are most important to make your writing more clear. Again, the goal for clarity is to make sure that our writers are engaging with ideas, not sitting there wondering, what did they just say? What are they trying to say? That type of thing. So the first way to make your writing more clear is to make your subjects and verbs the stars of your writing. The second is to ensure your writing is readable for your audience. And the third is to choose specific and vivid words. Now let's dive a little bit more into each of those. So when you are trying to make your subjects and verbs the stars of your writing, that means you need to do two things. First, you need to eliminate passive voice. And second, you need to reduce hidden verbs. So passive voice is when you have set up your sentence so that the object of the sentence comes before the subject of the sentence. So if the subject is typically who is doing the action, in most sentence structures, the subject should come first. They should come near the verb. They should be at the beginning of the sentence. However, if you set your sentence up in a passive construction, then the object comes first. So let me give you an example. Say you have the sentence, "The present was opened by Jane." In that sentence, Jane is the subject. She's the one who's doing the opening. She's opening the present. She's doing the action. The present is the object. It's the thing that's being opened. However, in that passive construction, the present is coming before Jane. So in a really simple sentence like "the present was opened by Jane," you're not going to confuse your readers too much. But the more complicated your sentences become, and the more important it is for your reader to understand who the subject is, then passive voice can get in the way of your reader's understanding. The same thing happens with hidden verbs. verbs. Hidden verbs are when you take a verb and turn it into a noun. So an example of that would be take the verb decide. So the verb decide, if you turned that verb into make a decision, that is a process called hiding verbs. So when you do that, when you take your verb word and you turn it into a noun phrase like make a decision, in that instance, you're hiding your verb and you're taking kind of the star power away from your verb, which should really be the foremost action word in your sentence. So when you're trying to set up your sentences in a clear, reader-focused way, you need to make sure that your subjects and verbs are the stars. When you do that, you're going to make your writing easier and more clear for your readers to understand. So Prowritingaid can help you do that. I am going to be referring to the Prowritingaid webinar throughout this presentation, talking about how we can apply these principles of clarity to a real document. So what you'll see right now is the Prowritingaid Web Editor. I have a crime sample here, and you'll see I have goals up here as well as the sidebar for grammar and style down here. Now, if you have Prowritingaid already, some of you might see this sidebar and some of you might not see the sidebar. It's okay. We're actually testing this as a new feature right now and just working out all of the kinks to make sure that it is ready to go for everyone. So if you don't see this right now in your own Prowritingaid, it's okay. It's going to roll out for everyone very shortly. So this is like a little sneak preview. But Prowritingaid can help you fix passive voice errors and hidden verb errors. So here's an example of a passive voice error. When you have errors like this, Prowritingaid can identify them as well as make suggestions for how you can fix it. Now, these errors, passive voice errors, are not grammatically incorrect. So your typical word processor, your typical, spell check in Google Docs or something like that is not going to flag them. However, like I said, these errors can get in the way of your reader's understanding of your work. So having a software like Prowritingaid to find these and flag them for you makes it really easy. Now, when you pop open a suggestion like this, you can see, again, recommendations for fixing it. You can also always decide to ignore it. So with passive voice being grammatically correct, right? It's not an actual mistake. It's just a stylistic choice. You can always decide that I want to keep the passive voice in there. So if you've decided that you want to keep a passive voice suggestion, you can always hit ignore, or you can hit to disable a rule. But again, Prowritingaid will come in here. It will find instances of passive voice, make recommendations for changes so that you can make your writing more clear. The same thing goes for hidden verbs. So the style report will find hidden verbs. This one actually doesn't have any in this article, but if it did, it would find those and then again, make recommendations for changing that. So again, you're giving the power back to your subjects and verbs. So let's keep on moving so that we can get to our questions. So as we are trying to make our subjects and verbs the stars of our writing, the next thing we need to do to make sure that our work is as clear as possible is to ensure our writing is readable. So readability varies for every single author. So we have almost 250 people on this webinar today. What's an appropriate readability score for each of us will kind of differ depending on who we're writing for and what we're writing. Basically, a readability score is a predictor of who will be able to understand your writing. And the key to understanding readability scores is that most readers like to read at a lower readability score than we actually think. So even though most of us writing crime fiction are probably writing for, at the very least, an older teen to adult audience, most of our readers will likely want to read at about a 7th grade reading level. That's because as readers, we want to spend more time, again, engaging with the plot and ideas than having to open a dictionary and figure out, what the heck the author is trying to say. So when we're writing crime fiction, we want to aim for, again, typically if you're going mass market for a larger audience, for around a 7th to 8th grade reading level to make our writing accessible to the widest variety of readers. That means that the language in our writing will be at about will be written in a way so that a 12 to 13-year-old could understand it if they wanted to. That has nothing to do with the ideas. It has to do with the content of how we've structured the sentences and chosen our words, okay? So you can always have very, very complicated ideas while still having a lower readability that, again, uses accessible language and sentence structure to make your readers understand. So the first thing to do to ensure your writing is readable is to target an appropriate readability score. Again, for most people who are writing mass market for large populations, you're going to look for around a 7th grade reading level. The other thing that you want to do is reduce glue words. So at Prowritingaid, we like to think about each sentence as having 2 types of words. Glue words are the words that hold the sentence together, and working words are the words that carry the sentence's meaning. So those are your nouns, your verbs, your adjectives, words that you couldn't change without changing the meaning of the sentence. So for instance, if I said Hayley gives a webinar and I switched Hayley out for Michelle, that would change the meaning of the sentence, right? It would change the subject. So Hayley is a working word in that sentence. If I decided to say, Hayley ran into the store to get some macaroni and cheese, and I decided to change into to two, that wouldn't really change the meaning of the sentence, which tells us that into is a glue word. Okay, so at Prowritingaid, we like to talk about all sentences as having both working words and glue words. The key when writing is to make sure that you're not overusing glue words. If you have too many glue words in your sentences are going to get too long. They're going to get clunky. They're going to get hard to read. Okay, so we recommend aiming for around 40% of your words in your sentence as glue and 60% words in your sentence working. Now, of course, that's really, really difficult to just figure out by yourself. So Prowritingaid can help you with that. So first of all, when you're looking through the writing style check, you can often find readability enhancements that will give you quick changes for different words and phrases that can be more effective. So for instance, saying over and over and again, you can switch that to be repeatedly to make the sentence more readable and easy to go. Now, if you were also in the goals section of the tool, you can also find your readability score here, and again, see what's an appropriate readability grade for your audience. I am just going to turn on the live transcription. I just got a note from Michelle. Give me a second. Okay, I think our live transcription should be on, but I can't quite tell, so we'll hope it's on right now. Okay, so again, when we're looking for readability, oh, I see it in the bottom corner. That's funny. Okay, so when we're looking at readability, we want to look at a number of different things because readability scores are built from not just word choice, not just sentence structure, but a number of different factors. So you can find enhancements for readability in many different places throughout the Prowritingaid software. So again, one of those might be in the style report. You can also find information on your document's readability in the goals section. And then you can find an overall look at readability with the readability report. So the readability report gives you an overall look at your document. It also, which I find really helpful, highlights places where you have a specifically difficult to read paragraph, so you know where you can spend some time to fix it. Now, the other thing that we just talked about in relation to readability were sticky sentences. So sticky sentences, again, are sentences that have too many glue words, too many words that aren't really serving a specific purpose. They're just kind of there to make the sentence stick together and make sense. So our goal with sticky sentences is to remove some of those glue words so that our sentences are more clear and to the point. Now, the sticky sentences check will highlight both sticky and semi-sticky sentences in your writing. Now, if you'll remember a minute ago, I said that we typically recommend that you aim for about 40% glue words, 60% working words in your sentences to make them as readable as possible. That being said, of course, not every single sentence is going to be 60-40 right on the nose. That's not what you need to aim for, but it is kind of your overall goal. So that's why we divided our sticky sentences check into both sticky and semi-sticky sentences to help you kind of figure out where to focus. So the sticky sentences are the sentences that have the most glue words. That's where you're going to want to spend your time. They have above 60% glue words in them. If you are in the semi-sticky range, then you're in that kind of 40 to 60 neighborhood where you might decide to keep this the sentence as is, or you might decide to try to eliminate some of those glue words. Either way, the sticky sentences check highlights the sentences for you and then does the work of finding the glue words. So it can help you really easily decide here are the words that I need to remove or replace or restructure to make the sentence, again, more clear and to the point. Okay, so our third principle here of clarity is to make sure that we're choosing specific and vivid words. So as a writer, you want to always avoid vague words and phrases and reduce your reliance on ineffective adverbs. So in order to make our writing more clear and meaningful for our readers, it's not just about having clear sentences, finding an appropriate readability score, passive voice, etc., avoiding passive voice and hidden verbs. It's also about making sure the words that you've chosen are as specific and vivid as possible. If your words are too vague, your readers are not going to understand what you're trying to say. So, for instance, if you are describing the villain in your story as tall, a word like tall is very subjective. I am very short, so everybody is tall to me. So that word is almost meaningless. Similarly, words like excellent or good, again, they mean different things to different people. So as the writer, you want to make sure your sentences are set up effectively and clearly, but also that the words in your sentence paint the specific picture you're trying to portray. This is especially important in crime fiction, where again, there can be so much meaning tied to one specific clue or to how somebody's looking, where somebody's looking, or to setting or anything like that. Crime fiction is all about leaving small details, right? So those small details that we leave need to be as specific as possible so our reader can pick up on them and understand what we're trying to say. So, first, we need to avoid vague words and phrases. We also want to reduce reliance on ineffective adverbs. So, ineffective adverbs are adverbs are words that modify verbs or nouns, and they tend to, when we use an adverb, it tends to tell us that we have done something with our noun or verb to make it less specific or less vivid than it can be. So, saying, ran quickly, for instance, is less specific and vivid than saying dashed. So when we rely on adverbs, it typically tends to indicate that we've been a little bit lazy in our word choice and we can choose something more vivid and more engaging for our readers. So Prowritingaid can help you with both of those things. So first, a couple different reports that I'm going to go in through here are let's start with our diction report. So our diction report can help you find places where you've used vague and abstract words and then figure out how to replace them, right? So it can identify some of those places where you found that. Now, another report that I find really helpful here is our dialogue report. So our dialogue report here can help you find places where you've used dialogue tags with adverbs. Now, like I just mentioned, adverbs tend to indicate that we've done something a little bit lazy in our writing, and we have not given enough weight to our nouns, we've not given enough weight to our verbs, and we need to do more to make our meaning clear with those kind of powerful words, right? Rather than having to add an adverb to explain our meaning. The same is true with dialogue. Dialogue should stand by itself and should explain how the character is thinking and feeling within itself. We don't want to always have to add an adverb to make our meaning clear. So in this sentence, the gardener answered evasively. Adding the adverb could there's kind of two options here. Adding the adverb will either mean that we've done something redundant and the dialogue is fine and we've kind of added this redundancy of evasively that our readers don't need, or it means that the dialogue itself is not doing a good enough job of pointing out what we're trying to get across, that the gardener is being invasive. So you always want to think in dialogue about how your dialogue itself can communicate what you're trying to get across without having to add this additional dialogue tag with the adverb there. So again, Prowritingaid has multiple different reports that can help you find places where you have used these vague and abstract words or places where you've overly relied on adverbs, again, to make your writing less effective. Okay, now let's talk about our second goal. So our first goal was to make our writing more clear and effective. So we talked about making our subjects and verbs the stars. We talked about prioritizing readability and then choosing specific words. Now, the second goal of any crime writer is to make your writing engaging, right? So we focused on making it clear. Now we also want to make it engaging so that your readers want to keep reading your book. So there are a few ways that you can do this. The first is to avoid echoes, redundancies, and repeating yourself. The second is to keep up the pace. And the third is to use sensory words that create a vivid picture for the readers. So let's first talk about how Prowritingaid can help you avoid echoes and redundancies. So this is something very, very dear to my heart because when I am writing fiction, I tend to repeat myself all the time. I am really guilty of getting a word or a phrase stuck in my head and having that being used over and over and over again in my descriptions. So ProWritingAid's repeats check and echoes check can help you find instances where you've repeated words or phrases, and where you've repeated them within a specific like word. A specific amount of words, so that you can say, hey, here are too many places where I've used the word lawyer within 30 words or something like that. So you can look through, you can find again what words you've repeated, how closely you've repeated. I'll show you how to customize that a little bit later, but it can again tell you where you've set out those echoes. The same thing is true for our repeats check. So our repeats check helps you find places where you've used frequent 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 word phrases. So again, it's helpful for someone like me who gets both single words and multiple phrases stuck in their writing. You can use this check to find, okay, I've said the phrase turquoise eyes over and over and over again in this chapter. I need to change that for something else. So it's really helpful to kind of avoid setting off that feeling for your reader of, didn't they just say that? Didn't they just say this to me? And that will keep your readers more engaged. ProWritingAid can also help you improve the pacing of your writing so it stays engaging. So as we are working on fiction, we'll have differing pacing throughout our writing. Typically, if we are describing setting or setting the scene or giving kind of backstory, we might be in a little bit more slowly paced of a section. However, if we are in a section where we are describing action, where there's a chase scene or something like that, you might want the pacing to be more quick. So that is where the pacing check can come in. So the pacing check highlights paragraphs within your document that are slowly paced. So you can go in there and you can see, okay, is this somewhere where I want to have slow pacing because I'm focusing again on a setting or description, or is this somewhere where I should be having more quickly paced sentences to keep the pace and make the writing more effective. You can also use the length check for this. The length check gives you a great visual overview of how long each of your sentences are. And I like to do this as kind of a quick overview of, okay, there's a group of really long sentences all in a row right here. Or there are a group of a lot of really short sentences in a row right here. It can give you a place to kind of zoom in and see, okay, did I mean to have a bunch of really, really short staccato sentences right in a row? Or did I, want to have some longer sentences to vary the pacing? So it can help you with that as well. And then finally, ProWritingAid can also help you use sensory words that create a vivid picture for your readers. So it's really important to create a vivid, holistic picture for your readers. And that means relying on more sentences than just sight. So our sensory report will give you a look at all of the different sense words that you've used in your writing. A lot of us tend to rely on sight and sound and ignore taste or touch or smell. This report will give you a good look into how many different sensory words you've had, so you can first decide if you have used enough appropriately, or if you have overused one of the sentences in favor of another. So you can try to keep it balanced and really create a vivid three-dimensional world for your readers. Now, I noticed in the chat that Ardell said that some of those short sentences could be a conversation, which actually is what's going on in this sample. And that's a really great segue into one of the things that I want to talk about as we transition into questions, which is how to use ProWritingAid in your writing process. So ProWritingAid, I like to think about as kind of like a writing coach. It's there to give you more information that you might not have about your own writing. Ultimately, as the writer, you can decide what you want to do with that information. So if we go all the way back to, for instance, the passive voice example we were looking at the beginning of this presentation, I can decide to leave that passive voice section. It's totally fine for me. I can decide I want that passive voice to stay there, and I can hit ignore. Same thing with the pacing check. I could just say, hey, I have a bunch of short sentences in a row, but that's fine because it is a conversation or because it is an action scene. The goal here is to give you many tools to understand your manuscript better. For me, again, when I'm working on my own fiction, I love to use the repeats and echoes checks because when I get that word or phrase stuck in my head, I don't even notice when I'm reading back. So then ProWritingAid comes and taps me on the shoulder and says, hey, Hayley, you've actually said this over and over and over again, which again, if I were just reading it back by myself, I would not know. So it's important important to make sure that you're looking or you're considering the information in these reports as giving you more information that you can choose what to do with. We're really big on author agency here at ProWritingAid. We want to make sure that you, again, use this to better your manuscript in whatever way you choose to, right? And so that is ultimately your choice about what you want to do or what you don't want to do. Okay, so I want to give a brief overview of some of the other features that I've kind of hinted at before we go deeper into questions. So actually, before we do that, I want to talk to you a little bit about my kind of process for using ProWritingAid. So like I said before, this is the ProWritingAid Web Editor. We have numerous ways to use the tool. We can do the web editor. We have a Chrome extension, a desktop app. I know there's some questions about Scrivener, which we'll get to in a little bit. We have a Word add-in. There's many ways that you can use ProWritingAid. For me, if I am working on something longer, so if I'm working on one of my novels, or if I am working on a longer blog post or something like that, I tend to turn all reports off until I am done with whatever segment I'm working on. So if I'm working on a chapter, I will turn off my real-time checker. I will write my chapter, and then when I'm ready to edit, I'll turn it back on. And that's because for me, when I'm working on something longer, seeing all the suggestions is a little bit distracting. So I like to turn it off until I'm ready. If I'm working on an email or something shorter, I'll have the real-time checker on to make sure it's catching any errors that I might accidentally send off. But again, for me personally, when I'm working, I want to have the information later rather than as I'm doing it. So that's my particular process. It's up to you to do that either way, but we have options for, again, having real-time checker on. If that's overwhelming for you, it's totally okay to turn it off until you're done. So let's talk about some of the other features in this. So first is the goals feature. So again, I'm giving you kind of a sneak preview of the sidebar here with goals. You can also, if you don't have the goals sidebar quite yet, you can find all of your goals in the summary section. So the summary report will give you an overview of the same key scores for your document, as well as areas where your document looks great, and then places where it might need some work. So this helps you really laser in and focus on what you need to do to make your writing more effective right away. So you can kind of skip over, actually I'm using passive voice kind of fine. So I'm just going to ignore those suggestions and instead focus on my sticky sentences because my glue words are way too high, right? So the goals feature gives you a key snapshot of your document, of the areas where you're doing well, and then also the places where you can spend more time to make your writing more effective. Now, the good thing about the goals section is that it's customizable based on what you're writing. So you can choose to select in an academic, a fiction, a creative, a casual, web script. You can change all within that. Now, within creative, so within fiction, we have multiple different options for different genres. So if you're writing mystery or horror or thriller, you'll get custom suggestions based on those specific documents, right? So things will change a little bit more depending on which specific type of writing you're doing. So that is our goals feature. Again, it gives you an overall snapshot, and then it also lets you customize and compare depending on the specific document type you're working on. Now, we also have a really great feature called author comparisons. Actually, let me go back to the summary report. So our author comparisons feature, which I will run here, compares your work versus a published author in your genre. So I have mine turned on or a published author of your choice, rather. I have mine turned on for Margaret Atwood, so I can compare the adverb usage I have versus Margaret Atwood's in her book, and it just gives you a good way to say, hey, how am I doing versus someone who I, again, feel is a kind of pinnacle, someone to emulate in what I'm trying to write. So you can change these in your user settings. We have dozens and dozens of different authors, including many different crime writers in here that you can change your settings to compare how your writing stacks up to that person. Okay, as I mentioned, we have multiple different integrations. So we have a Google Chrome extension, which is such a lifesaver if you're writing emails, if you are tweeting, if you're doing social media posts, but then also if you like to write in a place like Wattpad. It works with Wattpad, it works with World Anvil, it works with all these different writing tools to correct your writing exactly where you are. We also have a Google Docs extension, as well as a Word add-on and a desktop app as well. Now, a couple other features before we dive into questions. So As we've talked a little bit about, our goal at Prowritingaid is to give you as the writer more information to make the most effective decision for your writing. So we do not in any way want you to just blindly accept every suggestion that we make. We want you to think about it and figure out if it's right for you in your manuscript, and to feel empowered to say no to any suggestion. So that is why we have added this little I here in the corner. So this little I pops open and gives you articles as well as videos that you can use to learn more about the specific suggestion itself, so why we're making it, and then decide whether you want to have it happen or if you want to just ignore that suggestion. So these, again, are articles that tell you about what the specific suggestion is and why you should make it. The same thing is true here for the goals. So you can pop open every goal and learn about why, how long your sentences should be, why you're in, the green for a specific goal, or why you're in the yellow for another one. And again, it can just help you decide whether or not you are in a place that makes sense for your writing, or whether or not a suggestion makes sense for what you're trying to achieve. Some of those also have quizzes, which we can look at a little bit later if we have time, but I want to keep moving. So as I said, best practices here are to make this software work for you. Again, my process is to turn off the real-time checker if I'm working on something longer, because it gets overwhelming for me. So I try to turn off the real-time checker and then come back to it when I'm ready to make those edits. That being said, if it's not that way for you, if you like having the immediate feedback, then that's totally fine. Same thing goes for where you edit. Because we have so many integrations, you can, if you like the word add-in, that's amazing. You can use that. If you want to work in the web editor, also amazing. If you want to work with the Chrome extension, that's all fine. As a Prowritingaid premium subscriber, you have access to all of those integrations as part of your subscription. So no added cost. You get all of those included with your license. And we also have Prowritingaid University, which again, I will talk about a little bit more on Friday, but that is our community where we work together on live writing challenges, where we go through live workshops, and then we also have on-demand courses. But because we only have 25 minutes left, I want to go into questions because we have a lot. All right. So let's see. I want to pull up the Facebook ones first because those people had asked before. Let me just grab that window. Of course it's gone. Michelle, can you find the thread in Facebook for me that I had with the questions, and then just drop it into either Slack or the chat for me, and then I'll work through the Q&A here first. Okay, so let's see. Let's start at the top. So Nancy asks how to expand word length in a saved document. So Nancy, I'm not super sure what you mean by expand word length. There are no word count limits in Prowritingaid Premium. So you might have the free version. The free version is limited to 500 words. So if you are working on a longer document, then you would want to use Prowritingaid Premium because you have unlimited word counts. That being said, I would strongly suggest that you never try to upload your entire manuscript to Prowritingaid. A, because it'll take a really long time to run any of the reports, but B, like nobody needs to sit there and edit their entire manuscript in one sitting. I'd highly recommend going chapter by chapter if you can. Okay, Dave asks, any plans for Magic Movie screenwriting software or Final Cut? So we have Final Draft, but not Final Cut. Michelle, can you just drop actually the link to that Facebook thread itself? Because the questions are going to go really fast. And I'm going to lose them. But if you could just drop the URL, I'll open that in a window. So we're always looking for more. We're always looking for more integrations and more ways to support. Right now, we do Final Draft for movie rating software, but we can definitely take a look at Magic Movie and Final Cut as well. Okay, yeah. So Rebecca, I would say there's a couple ways to make your larger manuscript smaller. So one could be to upload just chapter by chapter. We also have a chapter indexing feature if you're uploading a Word document, or if you're writing in Word or something like that, you can select the text that you want it to write. So just like hover over and highlight the text that you want it to edit, and that will make it easy. But I tend to this is just my own weird self, but I save things separately. So I'll save each chapter file separately if I'm working in Word, and same thing if I'm in Google Docs. I just have my manuscript broken into chapter by chapter, and that makes it really easy to work in Prowritingaid. Okay. Dave asks, is there a way to have the program scan for verb tense? We get this question all the time. Unfortunately, right now, we don't have what you're looking for. So a way to tell when you've like slipped from present to past. Our linguistic team is always working on things like that, but it's really, really complicated just because it's context dependent, right? So you might be talking about present tense, but your book might be in the present tense, but your character is speaking in the past tense about something that happened to them before. So it's really hard, and we're working on it, but we don't have anything specifically like that right now. Okay, Henry asks, again, a couple more questions about word size. Is it best to edit in large or small bites? I would say like 5,000 to 10,000 words are probably like the highest you want to do at one time. Again, both for the software itself to not just take a long time, but then also for your own sanity. Okay, I'm looking at some of the Facebook questions now. So Mark, we got through some general info. Lisa talked about the author comparison. Okay, so Dennis, a couple of people have asked about Scrivener. So with Scrivener works with our desktop app. And basically what you can do is save and close your document in Scrivener, and then open it in the Prowritingaid desktop app, make your edits, save and close, and then reopen in Scrivener, and all of your edits will be right there. Michelle, if you can find the how to use Scrivener YouTube video and drop it in the chat just so we can keep going through the other questions. But it's really, really simple. You basically just save in Scrivener, upload into Prowritingaid, and then go back. Okay. So there's Janelle asks about customizing, so you don't have to constantly ignore certain types of highlights. So there's a lot of different options for customizing. So first, really easy, you can add things to dictionary. So if you want to add a word to your dictionary, adding it to your dictionary, again, then means that it doesn't flag as incorrect. That's one of the easiest ways to do that. Now, you can also choose to ignore a rule. So if you ignore a rule, to disable a rule, disabling a rule will disable it for all of your documents. So that's another kind of easy way to customize. That being said, a couple different caveats about disabling a rule. First, we have thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of rules. So our rules are context dependent, like I was talking about with tense before. So if, for instance, you have disabled the passive voice rule, but you still see other passive voice suggestions popping up, it's probably because you disabled one context, but not the other. So we just want to make sure that, again, we're covering all our bases to give you the most information about your writing, but also, as you're disabling, you might have disabled in one context, but not another. That being said, you can come in here to your app settings. So your settings overall lets you change the type of English that you're working with. So British, US, Australian, Canadian. You can also switch your writing style as well as your specific document type. But then within here in your app settings, you can do a bunch more things. So first you can set up a combo report, which is a way to run all of your favorite reports at one time. You can also add specific overused word checks that you want. So if there are particularly overused words that you want, you can add them there. You can say that you want to ignore specific errors within or specific flags within dialogue. I also, as I mentioned before, you can talk about or you can change your minimum repeat sections. So you can set, I want to say that any repeated word that is within or outside of 500 characters is fine, or you can set this higher or lower depending on how stringent you want to be on your repeats. You can also change your comparison settings. And then if you would like to, you can create a whole style guide. So Michelle, if you can drop the style guide link into the chat as well, the blog post one, that is another way to customize a bunch of different rules. So if you are working in a business context, for instance, and you want to replace one instance of a phrase always with another instance of a phrase, the style guide lets you create a ton of custom rules. It's a little bit too complicated for us to get into right now, but Michelle will drop that into the chat. And if you're watching this replay and you just search Prowritingaid style guide, that blog post will pop up and it'll tell you a bunch of different ways to create all kinds of custom rules for yourself. Okay, so how to interpret the author comparison charts. So the way that our comparison works is that it feeds books of a particular text into the software and analyzes them. So for each of the authors, we have at least 3 books that they have written. So 3 books that Agatha Christie wrote, for instance, and it analyzes that book for how many times Agatha Christie uses adverbs, how many times she uses passive voice, that type of thing throughout the writing. So then you can see, am I on par with that person or am I not on par with that person? So let me pull up the one with Atwood here again, knowing, of course, that Atwood isn't really a crime writer, but so I can see here that I have really highly overused emotion tells, and that is too high both for the average of my genre, thriller, and then also it's too high for Margaret Atwood. So what you can kind of draw from that is that I am doing something different than other published works in my genre and this author that I'm emulating. Typically, different is probably going to be a place where you want to focus more energy because you're saying I'm deviating from the published norm. But again, that's information that you can choose to do with. So it might tell you, I'm using far too many emotion tells, angry emotion tells. Writers in this genre just don't do that. And so I should try to reduce those to be more in line with what, again, this exemplary author in my genre is and what the other kind of standards in that genre are. So that's how you can kind of interpret these comparisons to say, hey, where am I on or off? Okay, had a couple word counts. And then how to use it most efficiently. A couple of people have asked how to use it most efficiently. So again, I think it depends on what you're writing and what your process is. If it's something short, I would recommend using the real-time checker. Again, an email, a Facebook post, even up to like a shorter blog post, the real-time checker can be really helpful. If you are working on something longer, so a chapter in a fiction book, my process is to turn off the real-time checker until I'm ready to edit. Then what I do is I look through my goals. Again, you can find either the goals here on the sidebar or in the summary report, and those tell you exactly where you should be focusing your energy to start with. So once I see that, okay, my passive voice is good, then I say I'm not going to focus on that, but I will focus on my emotion tells, or I will focus on my usage of dialogue tags. So the goals feature, again, which comes either in the sidebar or the summary report, can help you know when to start when you're starting to dive into one of those deeper things. Okay, let's see. Okay, so Joe asks, how do we get into the writing style check? So all of the reports on the web editor are up here on the toolbar. If you are in Word, you'll see a similar toolbar. If you're in the desktop app, you'll see a similar toolbar. And these are where you can kind of, again, the real-time checker combines grammar, style, and spelling. But then if you want to go deeper into any of the specific reports, you can come in here and click them. So you can find the individual style report here, though, like I just said, you will see style suggestions here in the goals feature as well. Okay, Anne asked, how does the reading grade level translate to the readability score? So there are a bunch of different ways to communicate readability scores, and there are just so many different there's so many different readability scores out there. We use the Flesch formula, and this corresponds to the grade level of US student that would be able to understand the vocabulary and sentence structure. So this would be 4th grade. So like students who are around 9 or 10 years old could understand the vocabulary and story structure in here. And again, I want you, if you're looking at readability score and it's kind of scaring you, I want you to think that it's actually almost always a good thing if your readability score is low. just because your readability score says 6 or 7, and that means it can be read by 10-year-olds, does not mean that your content has immature ideas. So I want you to think about separating content and copy in your mind. So you can have mature ideas and explain them using clear, easy to understand words and sentence structures. So readability is only about your sentence structure, your word choice, that type of thing. It has nothing to do with your ideas. Your ideas can be really complicated, really adult. Your words can be simple. Your sentences can be simple. And I would argue if you're talking about mature themes, if you're talking about complicated things, it's actually probably better to have an easier readability, to be more simple, because then it's just you don't want your meaning to be confused. You want to make sure that your meaning gets across. All those ideas that you spend so much time thinking about are communicated effectively. Okay. Linda asked about glue and working words. So let me see if I can pull up the sticky sentences chart really fast. So glue words and working words are the two types of words that we kind of divide every sentence into. So let me just pull this up really fast. So glue words are the most common words in the English language, around the 200 or so. There are a lot of prepositions, a lot of conjunctions, a lot of articles. They're basically words that you have to make your sentence make sense. Like every sentence will almost always have a glue word. But when you have too many of those, then your sentence becomes overly clunky and long. We want to lean into our working words, so our nouns, our adjectives, our verbs, and avoid some of these extra extraneous words that, again, if we have too many of them, the sentence is just going to be overly long. So that's the difference between glue and working words. Oh, Carrie asked a great question. What phase of the writing process do you introduce the Prowritingaid tool, at the outset or after the first draft? Great question. And actually, my session on Friday will be all about the different phases of editing and what you should do during each of them. And when you can introduce Prowritingaid. So I like to think about Prowritingaid as coming in at like the line editing, kind of copy editing stage. So it has nothing really to do too much with the developmental editing. So if you think about developmental editing as like looking at your content, your plot, your characterization, your scenes, that's not what Prowritingaid does. It focuses on word choice, sentence structure, readability, clarity, etc. So it's really focused on your words and how you're using them and how you're using your sentences. So with that being said, that means that if you're looking at like a whole novel, I typically recommend introducing it after you've done your developmental edit. So after you have done, your look at your content, your look at your plot, it'll come again during kind of like the line and copy editing stage. That being said, people also like to use it when you are, people also like to use the software when you are just going through your day-to-day edits. So for me, if I'm working on a chapter, I'll finish the chapter, I'll go back, I'll run it through Prowritingaid, but then I'll also again do it when I have a completed manuscript and I'm going back through the line and copy editing stages. Robert asks, does Prowritingaid provide a description of those grammatical errors? And yes, that's kind of what the I is. So the I explains the error specifically. We have thousands of these little articles that are all related to what your specific error is. So Ardell asks about the problem of Prowritingaid offering alternates within dialogue. And so that is totally fine. Again, you can ignore any individual suggestion, whatever you want. And then again, you can always go into here to your app settings to ignore specific things within your dialogue. So if you want to ignore cliches, redundancy, vague words, diction, etc., you can turn those off for dialogue. So that way you don't have to see those errors. Okay. Okay, so Monica asks, in each report, does the red of each color have a meaning, or does the color of each highlight have a meaning? Like, is blue okay, red no way? So yes and no. So there's not like one kind of color-coded system throughout the whole software. But that being said, in certain instances, the errors kind of correspond to specific things. So for here, you can see that our red correspond to sticky versus, and blue is semi-sticky. So looking over here in your sidebar will help you tell, because in some ways, in most instances, it's just a way of categorizing the type of error. So like if we look in our style, our style report, we can see that passive voice is underlined in red, as well as style improvement. So it's just kind of a way of coordinating the recommendations. Okay, Linda says, does Prowritingaid work for scripts? Yes, it does. Again, we work with final draft files, and you can also change your writing style to script as well here. Okay, Mark also asked the colors. We talked about that. Don asked when we will receive an update. So Don, we are updating all of the software almost every single day. For any of the like big features like this goals sidebar, we're just going through a lot of really, really rigorous rounds of quality testing with the people who have it already, just to make sure it's as effective as possible before everyone gets it. So all of the features we are trying to do as quickly as possible. If you don't have goals or anything like that, everyone should have goals at least in their summary. They might not see them in their sidebar yet. So if you don't have goals in your summary, then you're probably using an older version. So you might want to try and update. John asks, would an agent or editor know that you've used this program, and would it matter either way? I would say yes. We often get feedback from users who have sent a manuscript with Prowritingaid that they've written with Prowritingaid to an editor, and they almost always say, yeah, I can tell that this is really clean. And that also goes back to the question about the phases of editing. You always want to use your editor in the most effective way possible. So you don't want your editor to be spending time being like, you've overused passive voice, or you've forgotten a lot of commas, or, you have too many sticky sentences or glue words in this sticky sentence. Use the editor for things that matter, right? Like use the editor for, this person's out of character, or this scene should be cut because it's too slow, or, your plot doesn't make sense. Like use the human editor in the most effective way you can. So yes, like cleaning up your use of language using Prowritingaid can really make your time with the editor more effective. Okay. So right now, JRS, am I writing inside Prowritingaid or importing your writing? It's totally up to you. You can import a new file from a specific document type, or you can type right in here. It's up to you either way. Okay, I've just got time for two more. So the goals are either in your real-time sidebar, you can see them here, or again, if you run the summary, Rebecca asked. Someone asked, I write in Word. Do I have to stop writing in Word to use Prowritingaid? No, not at all. Prowritingaid has a Word add-in, so we install the Prowritingaid software directly into Word, so you can do it right in there. And it's exactly like Grammarly, but with more capability in Word. Jean asks, I've never added the Chrome extension. Can you turn it off? Yes. Let me just see if I have a good way to show you that really quickly, Jean. Karen asks, how does the company make money if everybody has a lifetime subscription? Hopefully you love it, and then we have more people buy more lifetime subscriptions. But then we also have, that's one of the reasons why we're doing tools like Prowritingaid University and stuff like that, to just have more ways to connect with writers. But we're happy if everybody has lifetime too. Okay, let me just show you here. So here is the Prowritingaid Chrome extension. So you can check to see whether it's enabled for a specific site. And then you can also toggle it on and off for all sites by default. So you can say, I just don't want it on Prowritingaid, or I just don't want it on Gmail, or you can again toggle it on and off for all sites. Okay. I think those are all the questions that I have time for. I will drop myself into a question thread in in the Facebook group to answer any questions that you have remaining. Thank you so much. I know this was just a ton of information about the software. Happy to answer any more questions that you have through Facebook. And then again, on Friday, we will be doing more of an editing focused session or more of a content focused session rather than a software focused session, focusing on the 3 stages of edits that your manuscript should go through in order to be ready for publishing. So I will see everyone on Friday and throughout the rest of this week. Catch you in the Facebook group and have a great rest of your day. Bye.